Well, then COVID hit, and actually, COVID was obviously crazy for small businesses, especially in-person service-based businesses, and class-based businesses where you have groups. But it's probably one of my moments in my business that I am most proud of, because it was sink or swim. And not only did we not sink, we grew. And that was not by chance. That was a lot of strategy, a lot of work. And I look back and reflect on that, and I'm incredibly proud of those results. And it's proof that, when your back is against a wall, don't go into fight or flight mode. You have to continue to be able to think clearly, but know that that's when your most creative moments happen.
So good to see you. I'm so excited to share a bit of your story today. You've been with Hera Hub for a long time. You started with Hera Hub when you launched your business. I think you came to us through a SCORE mentor. Is that right?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Well, I'm living proof that you don't necessarily have to have a business background to launch a business. My degree was in theater, of all things, and I had a great passion for that. But my business, which was called Brooke Byler Acting Studios, was a youth acting studio, and I had to give myself a business education along the way. So, and much of that is attributed to Hera Hub. So.
All right. What year did you start the business?
I started the business in 2014, and then I sold it just recently. And I never thought I would sell it, to be quite honest. And now I have also a completely different perspective about that, that when you start a business, even if you don't plan on selling it, it is wise to have in the back of your mind an exit strategy, because unexpected things come up. And I'm an example of that too, because um, in the back of my mind, it had already been playing there for a while, but we had a tragic loss in our family, and we had a family member become terminally ill. And that was not something obviously any of us anticipated. And it was not possible to continue to withstand and function the way that I had been. It just, something had to give. So anyways, that was not the only reason I sold the business. My plan was to set up the business in a way where I could step out. And then some other things happened where my studio manager had another opportunity in a different field that she was interested in. We had a great working relationship, and she decided she was going to leave. And at the time, I thought, I have to be able to duplicate myself again, because she was my duplicate, right? I had duplicated myself, which is something that we don't always do and is necessary. But then I thought, well, do I have the time and the bandwidth to duplicate myself again and train someone in this season of life? And do I want to? I think the business had a great potential to grow even further than what I was capable of giving it at that point in time. And I wanted to see it thrive and also benefit myself from all that I had built. And I started off probably only a couple of months prior to meeting you, but I was traveling to students' homes at the time. I was driving all over San Diego County, and I was a private coach. And in order to grow and scale, I needed to have a location where everyone came to me, and I could book them back to back, and I wasn't driving all over the universe. And so I came to Hera Hub, and and then at one point I was at two Hera Hub locations, one Temecula location at a dance studio, and an Orange County location. And then also there was another one in there, in addition to that, at one point, of a performing arts studio in San Diego. So it was great. I mean, it was a lot. It was doing well. And then when we kind of collaborated with this performing arts school, which unfortunately didn't last forever as well. You can have the best laid plans, right? And unexpected for them as well. They lost their lease unexpectedly. We could get to that lesson learned as well in a moment. But we were there. We consolidated to have one central hub where everyone could come to us. Then we were also available on Zoom and Skype, so we could still teach people anywhere. after the performing arts school unexpectedly lost their lease, we started searching for a commercial space nearby where we could have access to it 24/7. We could start renting out to people for some passive income as well. And we did have casting directors hold auditions there, and that was great for our brand as well. And then ultimately, well, then COVID hit, and actually, COVID was obviously crazy for small businesses, especially in-person service-based businesses and class-based businesses where you have groups. But it's probably one of my moments in my business that I am most proud of, because it was sink or swim. And not only did we not sink, we grew. And that was not by chance. That was a lot of strategy, a lot of work. And I look back and reflect on that, and I'm incredibly proud of those results. And it's proof that, when your back is against a wall, don't go into fight or flight mode. You have to continue to be able to think clearly, but know that that's when your most creative moments happen. At one point, I had 7 staff members. And a couple of those were independent contractors who would work only like an hour or 2 a week for me sometimes, because one was a mom and she had wanted flexibility. Another one was not always in town, but when California passed AB5 and they had to become employees, unfortunately, that was a rough season. Because I had such a dream team and everyone had the flexibility of controlling their own schedule. But then for some of these people, it didn't make sense for me to even pay to run payroll, which cost more than what they made for the couple of hours that they chose to work. So that was a major bummer. So we had to scale down to, I believe it was 3 of us, maybe 4 of us at that time. And then as far as how many people we taught, we would typically in a given week teach about 100 kids, maybe more if we had some big workshops, but with weekly classes and private sessions, like 100 to 120 kids. It's interesting. I refused to walk away from what I built for less than what I thought it was worth. Not even necessarily monetarily, but just worth to the person I was selling it to. Like, did it hold value enough to them to become their baby and continue have it to continue to thrive? Because there were several prospects that I talked to who just wanted to buy my list or make it into something completely different. And once you sell it, they have the right to do that. And I didn't want to take away necessarily the freedom of the new owner's ability to tweak things and change things, but some people were after a different aspect of the business, and I wanted to sell what was serving our customers, and I didn't want that to disappear. And because it was COVID, it was a tricky time for a new owner, because they couldn't say, you're also selling me, the lease to your brick and mortar. I have a place to function out of, because we were functioning on Zoom. We were functioning out of a local park once we were allowed to gather in open spaces. And then ultimately, eventually, we would be able to function again, starting at Hera Hub. Such a blessing to have that instead of having to go straight into the risk of a retail space again, not knowing if this was going to hold out long term. And because the lease that I actually had, I paid 6 months of rent on an empty studio before my lease was up, and they gave me no break. Fortunately, the business was still growing to where, I had budgeted my rent and it wasn't a huge loss, but it was very
painful. That's painful.
It is painful. And obviously a huge risk to a new owner coming in. When someone's looking to buy your business, they're looking at what are all the risks? What are the liabilities? And where could this go wrong? And the what ifs happen. So I tried to overcome those objections before they even occurred, knowing, what would be in their head and what they would be thinking about the what ifs, and address those. And I was really fortunate that I was able to come before any prospective buyers and say, COVID happened and you're going to see our numbers. They never go down. They continue to go up. Otherwise, I don't think it would have been possible to sell it. I probably would have just sustained at status quo with where we were at for a while. So kind of like I said, my studio manager was going in a different direction with a different industry. My brother-in-law, my husband's brother, was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. He had 3 precious little girls that were left behind, my nieces. It was just and COVID is going on. I mean, it was just I had a 2 and a 4-year-old at home. I mean, looking back, I have no idea how we sustained all of the grief and the stress and the hardship. And I'm developing a new iteration of my business from home with the kids home. My husband had an essential job, so he was out of the house. It was a crazy time. But again, when your back is against the wall, you are in survival mode. You have this like well of adrenaline making you function that you didn't know existed. And I really looked at it as it was kind of fun in the sense of I like the creativity of here's the problem. How am I going to solve it? I have to get creative. I did not have like, this is who I'm going to sell it to. This is what it's going to look like. So came across some deals that were just not good. They wanted to buy the list, which that's not what I was looking to sell. Another one, we had gone through this whole process of negotiating. If there's anything I learned, it's not fast. Negotiating the terms of a business sale is very tedious and long, or at least really it should be, because if you have a good attorney, they're looking at all of the what ifs of that contract. You're in the honeymoon phase right now. Everyone gets along, but their job is to look at all of the potential what ifs, what could happen, what could go wrong, and how do we get that set in stone now so there's no gray area. That's when the relationships fall apart and someone leaves unhappy. So this other, I was so close to selling to another studio that was looking to expand to San Diego. And we just couldn't come to an agreement. We had very different ideas of what it should look like. And they were very, very nice people. And I don't even know if they knew how bad the deal was for me, because I think they thought they were offering me something great, but the deal, and they're such nice people, so it's really hard sometimes to see through. You have to put it on paper to go, no, this is actually a really bad deal. The deal was, we'll pay you this, we'll pay you for your business, and then you come back to work for us for this many hours, hitting these goals, yada, yada, but not willing to pay me to work for them. So I was like, well, you're not really buying my business then. I'm either working for you for free and you bought the business, or somehow you're mixing the two together, thinking that somehow pays me. It's two different things. I'm selling you a business that makes money, and then my work for you is should be hiring
should
me.
Also be paid. And at the same time, you started a business because you started a business. Selling your business and then being an employee of somebody else's business probably wasn't attractive.
It was not attractive. And from their perspective, they were trying to mitigate risk of being worried that the customers were all going to disappear because I wasn't still in the picture. And so my job was going to be client retention. And
lots of companies will do that. They'll keep the owner on, but compensate them for it. And folks should know, as part of the story, I mean, your name is on the door, right? It wasn't San Diego Acting Studio, it's Brooke Byler Acting. So, that certainly, I can certainly understand that. But yes, that sounds like a terrible deal. How did you go about this? Did you shoulder tap a few people? Did you use a broker? Like, lots of folks wonder, like, how, once you decide to sell a business, like, how do you?
Yes, absolutely. So because I'm such a specific niche market, I think there's an advantage to this. I went out and I sought prospective buyers that didn't even know that they might even be in the market for buying a business, but I just approached them and I said, I am coming to you because I'm impressed by you. And like, I did the shopping first so that I could vet who I was even talking to. It wasn't just anybody. So no, I didn't go through a broker. It was all personal contacts, reaching out to them. And so anyways, it was not a great deal. So I declined that deal. And I mean, that was like weeks. No, it was months. It was months of negotiations, because you discuss, then you may or may not talk to your attorney, and they take a week or however long to get back to you. And then you set up another meeting and there's a delay in that. And it's a very slow process. At least mine was. And so I really think that's important to keep in mind, because you have to plan ahead. If you need to sell it quickly, then that's also not a good position to be in as an owner. The good position to be in is I don't have to sell. I'm only going to sell if it's the right fit. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not alone in that. Everybody who I've spoken to in this video series is same thing, minimum 6 months, sometimes a year and a half, 2 years, especially through COVID. I just interviewed a woman that it took about 2 years to actually get through the process because it was like 2 steps forward and then 1 step back.
Yeah.
Tricky time.
Yes. Yes.
So let's get to how did you decide to sell to one of your team members?
Yes. So since this other deal fell through and it was not the right fit, I was warring with, do I keep it? I really had my mindset on selling it for so many reasons. But how do I do this without shortchanging myself? How do I do this without getting to a point of desperation and then I just offload it, And by this point, I was also so overwhelmed. I was like teeter-tottering between that. I just want to be done, and that's not a good position to be in either. So I had reached out to one of my coaches who worked with me for 6 or 7 years by this point, when I was selling it. And he had originally been interested, but didn't have the ability to do a lump sum and buy the business outright. And that was preferable. So I had kind of sought that out first, but always in the back of my mind thinking, well, we could come up with a creative solution if it comes down to it. And so that is what we ended up doing. And my goodness, it was like the best possible case scenario. I can't imagine it having gone any other way. So we actually did a 10%. I get 10% of gross until it's paid off. And there's a 5-year window to pay it off with no interest. And then anything after 5 years, I think it's 9% interest on the remaining balance. So there's incentive with that structure to pay it off quickly. And it's been really cool because he's been setting records that I hadn't even set. And then from his perspective, he's so thankful to have been given an operation that already has the infrastructure and it's turnkey and it's a well-oiled machine. Because one of the arguments was when I was first going to sell it, my attorney, one of his arguments was, well, why can't the person you're selling it to just go start their own? I mean, it's a service-based business. If they have the skill set, why can't they just go start their own studio? And I was like, because I put in the blood, sweat, and tears to build the actual business, the client base, the infrastructure, the operations, and everything. And all he has to do is inherit that and then run with it. And I mean, it's been so rewarding to see how it's thriving, and it was a win for everybody. So I'm very thankful.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Brooke. It's I haven't heard that a lot in some of the interviews I've done. So it sounds like a bit of a creative way to go about it. And I'm so glad it has worked out. And, from our perspective, it's been fun to see Mike, continue to grow the business. Talk about, again, your name, your brand. You sold it with that, and he continued to use your name in the business. And then has recently, right, changed the name of the business. So what is the new name of the business?
Yes, the new name, it remains the same acronym of BBAS, but now it's Basics to Booking Acting Studio, which I love. It encapsulates the whole process, right? Just within the name. And so picking a name is also an interesting thing. I had modeled mine off of the Los Angeles on-camera studios, where you have the person who specializes and whose studio it is. It's modeled after their name. And when you're starting a business, it is an interesting thing to think through, because one thing it did allow was that I could then, once I had a team, become sort of the sought after expert of the business, right? Because it was my business, my name, and I was able to charge more for the value that I brought with the brand. And so that was fun. But then you have to think on the flip side, it can be a little bit limiting too, depending on what industry you're in. And I was still present, and there's a consultant, but because of everything that was going on with my brother-in-law, I was not there on a daily basis. And that can be like a little bit confusing for people as well. So things to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I do talk to a lot of new business owners about that idea of using their name. A lot can go wrong with that.
Yes. I wouldn't recommend it, honestly, unless it is something as specific as like an acting studio, because there's not a lot of benefit except for, becoming the guru of the business, but it's not necessarily the way to go.
Yeah, I had a woman that I know that owns I won't say the name of the business, but she owns a business and it had her last name on it. And her son got in a lot of trouble at college, and it was very public.
Oh no.
Locally here in San Diego. And so again, reason number 10 why you may not want to put your name on the business.
Yes.
Anyways.
And I think Mike is so brilliant too. I mean, he was trying to get creative with the BBAS, but then stumbled upon this brilliant idea of it in your name, you should be able to tell the customer what it is that you are promising and selling and doing. And he does. So
that's awesome. I love it. Okay. Other lessons learned. You've shared a few things. We can circle back to this conversation on a lease if you want, if there's anything else you want to add on that side of things. And just to add, Mike recently signed a lease, which is very exciting, although he's still, hoofing around Hera Hubs throughout SoCal as well. So I get to see him here on a weekly basis still.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. That's awesome. The lease was just interesting because, this amazing performing arts studio, they had done all their due diligence in looking for spaces. They had had the San Diego inspector of, whatever come out and say, yeah, it's all good. It's fine. Well, apparently that person is in a different department than the actual, zoning office, and they don't communicate. And so they had signed off. This performing arts school thought everything was then fine and dandy, clearly, because they cleared everything through the city of San Diego. Well, a competitor at some point called into the city of San Diego and reported them for saying they're not within their zoning area. They're not zoned to have a performing arts school, a dance studio, and yada, yada in this area. And so, the city came in and said, we're sorry, you can't be here. We're sorry for the hundreds of thousands of dollars that you've put into this facility. But they fought it with an attorney, and the city basically said, well, it's a gray area. And until someone reports it, we don't typically take action on it until there's a complaint or a problem. And the other argument was like, we got it cleared by you. The city signed off on it. And they said, well, it's a different department than we are. And so anyway, so my advice would be, and when I was looking for our own space, my broker never mentioned zoning, and was giving me all of these spaces that I ended up, because of this horrible experience, knowing I needed to do my due diligence on. And that shouldn't be my job. That should be their job. So to make sure that you are in good hands, which is so often hard, and why Hera Hub is such an amazing blessing, because you have like the gift of word of mouth and networking and all of that. Because I feel like the same thing goes for attorneys. Very often you don't know if you have a good attorney or not. You hired them to speak this foreign language, legal language that you don't speak, reading these contracts. And I've had terrible attorneys and I've had good attorneys, and they are worth their weight in gold. So that was one lesson. And then I think the hardest part for me within like my experience with the business is losing some valuable relationships, because as the business grows, dynamics can change, or the business goes in a different direction. And I know with some of my colleagues, like we were trying to please each other instead of look at the business as its own separate entity and ask ourselves, what does the business need and what are the best decisions for the business? It's very hard. I mean, we're social beings, and we have compassion and care for other people. So that was the hardest part for me, was for probably too long sustaining things that we should have just had more open, direct conversations about from both parties. Because it wasn't, and also I'm imperfect person trying to run a business and learn as well, and educate myself as we go. So I certainly didn't do everything perfectly, and I've learned a lot in hindsight. And so being on the more people pleasing side, right, that finding that balance is tricky. And so I would say looking at the business as kind of like its own entity, and what does it need? What's going to, someone else at Hera Hub, was it Nikki maybe? She said, feed the business first. Yeah, feed the business first, because if the business isn't being fed, then you have no business with which to work on.
To feed yourself.
Exactly.
And your family.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tricky balance, always, always.
Yeah.
So let's go to the day you signed the paperwork, although I'm sure it was probably electronic, but figuratively, right?
Yeah.
What did it feel like the next day, Brooke?
Yeah, it was definitely surreal. So it was, Mike and I actually did get together just to like exchange the hard copy, and I brought him congratulations balloons. And it actually was a really cool experience to know somebody and know his caliber of work and his work ethic and what he was going to do with the business. And then the next day, I honestly felt such a huge sigh of relief. This is my baby. So you think that there's going to be another identity crisis coming down the pipeline, right? Or this loss. And that just told me that it was the right move and it was time. And it was something I'd been thinking about for so long, that by the time it finally came to fruition, it was a huge sigh of relief.
And this is all while you started building your family too.
Yes. Yes. And that is a hard transition. That goes from, it's an amazing transition, of course, but it's hard as far as learning how to juggle it all. Even juggling it all seems like an ironic use. It's not even, it's all falling around you and you're trying to just keep your head above water, but that's not a good place
catch things as
they're raining down upon you. But you were so instrumental in that period, because that is it's like business identity crisis a little bit, because all of the sudden you're needed and your time and attention is being demanded in multiple areas, whereas before my business was my baby. All my attention and my time went into it, and now it's being split. And obviously, your children are the priorities, and these living, breathing human beings need to be your priorities. And I wanted that to be my priority. So I really was torn on how do I juggle this all. And you had helped me come up with some creative strategies to do that. And a lot of that is delegate and duplicate. And I heard a quote recently that said, delegate or stagnate. And I liked that, because that is very true. You're only one person and you can only do so much. There's only so much time in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So at what point, Brooke, did you start to think about transitioning out of the business? And, what were the options you thought about? Was it first like, I'm going to sell this? Or, was there an array of things that went through your mind? Again, you had a close family member who had a terminal illness. Obviously, that must have been just very, very difficult.
So I owned it for 9 years, almost a decade, and a good portion of that at Hera Hub. And I attribute so much of its success to the resources and support that I got from Hera Hub. And so I was thinking, before we met today, I was going for a walk and I was thinking about this, and I thought, having the guts to try is so huge, because so many people have ideas or think about it. And I think most entrepreneurs too, we go through multiple attempts at something before we find the thing that really works. And that was me. I did several things, and I think people will sometimes look down their nose at you a little bit and go like, oh, she's just trying everything and nothing ever sticks, or it never pans out. And I just think, well, there's something to be said for the people who are willing to try, because all of the businesses that we're surrounded by and the amenities that we enjoy and the services we enjoy were built by someone who was willing to try. And I think we do go into it maybe with a certain level of naivete, and that's probably a blessing, because otherwise we may not try. But there's a difference between trying and going it alone, and trying and having the guts to try, but surrounding yourself with mentors and networking, support, and resources, which is what Hera Hub has to offer. And so that is why I attribute so much of what I gained from your community to the growth of my business. I feel like I gave myself an MBA simply through what I've learned, and now I'm on my second business. So I sold one, and now I'm on the second.
So exciting. Yeah. And you've rejoined. Welcome back.
Yes, it's so great.
Awesome. Can you tell us just briefly, what is your new business?
Yes, absolutely. Talk about different industries and random. If I gave you 10 guesses, you wouldn't guess what my two businesses have been. So acting studio into board game publishing. So my husband he likes to design board games as a hobby, but one got published a couple years ago, and we got the license back to that, and we get to print the second edition, as well as some others that he has already designed. So it's fun. I have my income from the sale of my business. I'm getting to be present with my kids, not while losing my mind trying to do it all, and not having duplicated myself enough in my previous business to feel like it was balanced. And probably a lot of that was due to being in the middle of COVID there at the end. But I'm having a blast learning this new industry. I had no idea how I could run an acting studio and have gained so many hats and skills that I can actually carry over to the board game industry. I designed our own website. All of these little like unintended effects that I learned from my previous business that carry over. So yeah, just learning a new market.
That's awesome. We need to play your board game at Hera Hub.
Yeah. Oh, we'll have to have maybe a launch night for our next game.
Yeah, game night.
I had listened to the book that you had recommended years ago called Ready, Fire, Aim, right? And that has become my mantra recently, because you could ready, aim, and never fire and pull the trigger on the business and do something. And even if you have everything perfected, there's still going to be tweaks that need to be made. And so that's where we're at in our infancy stages with the new business. Is we're needing to ready, fire, and then make our tweaks. And so you don't want to get caught in the cycle of overthinking, because that's just, even when it comes to, I reread this email 5 times. If I catch myself doing that, then I need to say, okay, just need to send it, stop overthinking. So catching those moments where you're overanalyzing. Sometimes it's necessary. You need to analyze the perspective of your customer. You need to analyze a lot of things. So I think we get in this like analytical, analyzing point of view of, I'm going to analyze everything, and you can analyze things to death. So
absolutely. I think a lot of that comes from confidence, right? Mm-hmm. If you're confident in what you're doing, it certainly allows you to execute on things, I think, more quickly. My phrase, I say it all the time, and I say it to everyone through my Launch Academy and the different, sessions that I teach, is done is always better than perfect.
Yes.
Right?
I love that. Yes.
Just get it off your plate. So
yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, your journey, your story. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.